Stop right there. Officer Reeves's shout tore through the hushed air of Harborview Diner. The sudden eruption startled every patron. Marcus Walker, an African-American former Navy SEAL who had once risked his life to save his brothers in combat, was merely attempting to pay for his breakfast. But when the officer raised his handcuffs with a sneer that dared Marcus to rise, the entire room snapped to attention. A quiet man, long dismissed as homeless, was abruptly thrust into the spotlight of a justice-defining confrontation. If you let this moment slip by, you'll regret missing a profound lesson in human dignity. The dim light filtering through the window of Harborview Diner was like a fragile beacon of hope stretched across a person's life. Marcus Walker, a black former Navy SEAL, shrugged off his shoulders and adjusted the worn pilot's jacket. He always wore its fabric cracked and faded, but over his heart it still held the gleam of his SEAL medal beneath the thin cloth. He laid that medal between his faded leather wallet and a black and white photograph, himself standing beside the wreckage of a helicopter shot down off the coast of Hormuz in 2004. The large scar on his left knee, a reminder of the mission to rescue hostages in Fallujah, haunted him each morning, reminding him that, even when society cast him into obscurity, he still carried unquenchable strength and determination within. The diner's atmosphere remained oddly tranquil. The clink of metal plates, the pungent aroma of black coffee, and the everyday concerns of customers brushing raindrops from their sleeves as they settled in near the car. Marcus slid into his usual corner seat by the window, back against the cracked brown vinyl bench, and slowly set his plate of scrambled eggs and toast on the table. He's counting out 7 strips of bacon, then smiling to himself. A nearby diner mused silently, never voicing the thought aloud. Marcus took a careful sip of coffee, his lips twitching slightly. Its bitter flavor mirrored his own life. No sweet cream, no decorative sugar. Suddenly, the diner's door slammed open with a harsh clang. 2 Tacoma officers, Reeves, tall and broad-shouldered like a rugby player, and Connors, shorter but solidly built, stepped inside. All eyes fixed on them as if they were the silent protagonists of a tense drama. Marcus flinched. He knew he'd been invisible too long, but today fate seemed intent on aggravating his wounds. Reeves planted his heavy boot on the cement floor, his voice echoing like a hammer on iron. "What are you buying here?" Marcus did not reply immediately. Instead, he raised one eyebrow, coffee cup still cradled in his hand. The warmth spread across the table as though he were holding on to calm in the midst of a storm. Connors curled his lip, his tone dripping contempt. "You got any ID? A green card or something?" He referred to Marcus's VA card as though it were a worn-out toy. No one in the diner dared speak. Mia, the friendly server, sighed softly and wiped the table briskly. Mr. Walker paid when he placed his order, but Reeves turned away, his gaze utterly devoid of sympathy. To him, Marcus was nothing more than some drifter. Joe, the owner, blinked behind his wire-rimmed glasses, tightened his grip on the rag and lowered his hand. Silence spread across the booths like a tide. In that moment, Marcus breathed evenly, tears glinting unspoken in his eyes, but not out of fear. Deliberately, he reached into his pilot's jacket and withdrew the square VA card, its edges dented and worn by years of being tossed around in pockets. That card had carried him through scorching deserts. A testament that he was more than a nameless homeless man, he had been an elite warrior. He set the card on the table. The overhead light flickered against its scratched surface. But Reeves and Connors had already cast him in their internal script. They saw a threat, not a human being. "Will that green card let you stay seated here forever?" Reeves sneered, his voice icy. A flicker of wry humor crossed Marcus's mind. "Maybe I should sign up for a VIP seat for veterans," he thought, quietly enough for only himself to hear. Before pushing his plate forward, an ordinary gesture made brutally pointed, as if inviting the officers to truly see him. The tension in the diner crested, every sense sharpened. The scent of ink from the officers' paperwork, the stale tobacco on their collars, and the faint click of the coffee lid as Marcus placed his card down all blended into a silent symphony of prejudice and resolve. And then, just when you might assume Marcus was merely a bit player, an anonymous statistic among the homeless, he lifted his old flip phone, preparing to dial a number that would change everything. But that twist won't unfold unless you stay tuned. Are you willing to see what he'll do next? Marcus Walker glanced up at the neon sign flickering on the lamppost before stepping into Harborview Diner, where the aroma of freshly brewed coffee mingled with the hissing of the toaster oven. For the past year, he had always chosen the corner seat by the window, sheltered from the rain, yet offering a clear view of Tacoma's glistening streets. To Marcus, this diner was more than a place for breakfast. It was a microcosm of his invisible existence as a black former Navy SEAL, once a warrior on distant battlefields, now weary and eclipsed by a city with no place for him. But don't rush away, there is much more yet to be revealed. Each morning, Marcus would reach into the pocket of his worn flight jacket and retrieve his cracked leather wallet. From it, he would lift out his SEAL medal and place it beside a faded photograph of a shattered helicopter off the coast of Hormuz. Those items were not tokens of glory, but the only armor that reminded him of who he once was. Now, all he sought was a steaming cup of black coffee and a plate of scrambled eggs, companions to the ache that gnawed at him. Why was a man willing to lay down his life for his country treated like so much scrap paper? Strangers' eyes would drift away the moment they reached his familiar table. Occasionally, an elderly lady would pause, offer a slight smile, and nod, "Hello, Mr. SEAL," as if he were some secret CIA operative. But most simply passed by, heads bowed over their phones or flitting to Joe, the diner's owner, whose awkward grin betrayed his knowledge of Marcus's routine order. Eggs with 2 strips of sausage and buttered toast. Yet Joe rarely dared to intervene in the silent duel between Marcus and an indifferent world. Tacoma was not without its kindness. Mia, the quick-witted waitress, would tease him, "Do you taste ocean smoke in your brew today?" Her laughter broke the tension until the 2 officers strode in, extinguishing her cheer in an instant. Their eyes scrutinized Marcus as though he were only a badged homeless man. In a heartbeat, the diner transformed into an unwelcome interrogation room, where the law questioned his character rather than his paperwork. Marcus did not lower the newspaper before him. He quietly lifted his pen to note the bus numbers passing outside, his way of mapping endless routes to shelters, clinics, and veteran support groups. He sometimes wondered if the soldier in the Hormuz photograph still recognized himself beneath the dust-streaked uniform and the scar on his knee that throbbed whenever the wind changed. But Marcus did not brood. He wielded his SEAL medal like a trump card whenever someone challenged his identity. The soft clink of steel against fabric hushed the entire diner. He never had to shout, "I am a SEAL!" for the medal spoke on his behalf. Even when society tried to erase him, his commitment to duty and discipline remained unshakable. Yet Marcus's story did not end there. Behind the steely veteran stood a broader vision, a world in which he was both witness and casualty of a system that too often discovers human worth only when it's nearly too late. As the officers peered at him through their lenses of bias, Marcus felt himself at a crossroads: either remain silent once more, invisible and unheard, or let his medal tell the story that society refused to acknowledge. Which path would he choose, continuing to fade into the background, or allowing his own history to awaken a community? Dear audience, grab a glass of water, take a moment to relax, and keep listening to the story. The twists are still to come. And please drop a comment below letting me know where you're watching from and what time it is for you. It's always a joy to see who's joining us from around the world. Drop a 1 in the comments if you find this story gripping, so we can keep bringing you more captivating tales. Just a moment ago, the familiar murmur of regulars and the comforting hiss of coffee-filling cups still warmed the diner. But as Officer Connors raised his hand to snap handcuffs onto Marcus Walker's wrist, the air felt as though it had been squeezed to silence. The clatter and crash of falling dishes only heightened the sudden stillness. Mia, the petite server, with her hair tied high, pressed her hands against the counter, her eyes misting as she desperately tried to halt what was unfolding. Yet Connors snapped, "Stand up now, or we'll force you out. Everyone knew you didn't treat a former SEAL the way you did a spilled order." Amid this injustice, Marcus bent at the waist, his firm hand slipping into the pocket of his pilot's jacket. He withdrew a black flip phone, a relic of another era, now more antique than tool. A few patrons curled their lips in amusement. "Betty's about to open an app to call the district attorney." But Marcus offered no smile. Instead, he pressed and held the speed dial button he'd programmed years ago for one number only. In that moment, the soft click of the keys sounded as urgent as a siren. The sharp click announcing the first dial tone snapped every nerve in the diner taut. Curious heads turned, eyes fixed on the phone in Marcus's hand. Joe, the owner, froze mid-gesture, unable even to cry out. All gazes converged on Marcus, the man who once piloted patrol boats through roaring seas, now seated alone amid a hush of collective anticipation. Outside, the crisp heels of polished leather announced new authority. The door swung open on its pivot, tapping softly against the wooden frame as though to declare a power shift. A woman entered, a figure whose walk lacked natural grace but whose tailored presence and steely gaze brooked no doubt. She wore a navy blue blazer over a crisp white shirt, the U.S. Attorney's badge glinted beneath the diner's lights. It was Deputy Director Christine Alvarez, the very person Marcus had saved under that one speed dial number. Without a word of preamble, Alvarez strode to the counter. She stood shorter than Reeves but fixed him with eyes sharper than any blade. She held up her credentials, her badge bright as a 5-pointed star, and stated, "Officers, I need your badge numbers right now." Her tone was concise, unwavering, devoid of showmanship. Yet it caused Reeves and Connors to shrink back, like schoolboys caught in mischief. Time slowed to cinematic rhythm. Reeves roared to protest. Connors fumbled for his wallet, jabbing at pages to record his numbers. The scratch of pen on paper and rustle of forms echoed as the diner collectively held its breath. Mia exhaled, placing a fresh cup of coffee before Marcus, her lips forming silent relief. Joe slipped his rag behind his back, observing the unexpected mind game in stunned silence. While the officers jotted down their details, Alvarez offered a conciliatory smile, no arrogance, only genuine intent. She did not thunder orders. She quietly drew from her inner pocket a slip of suspension orders and laid it on the counter beside Marcus's seal medal. With a subtle nod in his direction, Marcus understood the balance of power had shifted. His call had unlocked legal authority that Reeves and Connors, no matter how forcefully they protested, could not withstand. The tension melted away. Everyday sounds returned. A passerby's soft footstep, the clink of spoon against ceramic. Mia smiled shyly as she placed a plate of cinnamon donuts on the counter. "Sorry, Mr. Walker, still your usual donut, right?" Laughter rippled through the diner, a healing salve for the recently dispersed anxiety. Marcus accepted the treat with a gentle nod, his eyes shining with quiet gratitude. Behind Alvarez, the doorway framed the steady drizzle outside. She turned once more to the room, her look imbued with encouragement. "Carry on, serving breakfast the way it's meant to be served." Her words, simple yet resonant, spoke a silent mandate for respect and justice. Marcus made room for her to pass, stepping aside so she could resume her day's work. The diner's atmosphere suddenly felt unusually warm, as if it had just emerged from a raging storm, the narrator observed through the misted window pane. As officers Reeves and Connors slipped away in awkward silence, Marcus Walker remained seated in his familiar booth, his eyes quietly fixed on the gleaming seal medal beneath the dim yellow light. That seemingly small gesture, Marcus gently lifting the medal and placing it carefully on the table as though cradling his most precious keepsake, proved to be the subtle spark that ignited an unstoppable change. From behind the counter, Mia approached, softly refilling his cup with steaming black coffee. Her lips curved in a knowing half-smile, her eyes alight with both pride and concern. Joe, in turn, placed a fresh plate of eggs before Marcus on the house. He said, Yet those two simple words felt like a balm to the soul. No grand apology, no fanfare of flags, just a small but profoundly meaningful act. Food and coffee enough to warm the heart. Marcus paused as he accepted the eggs. He nodded in genuine gratitude, then gently lowered his coffee cup, fingers brushing the cold metal rim of his medal. In that instant, time seemed to freeze. Patrons' glances drifted his way, from the delivery driver by the door to the elderly lady perched cross-legged with her tattered newspaper. Every spoon lifted, every chair shifted, all eyes turned toward Marcus, not because he was homeless, nor merely because he was a veteran, but because he had affirmed the simple truth of human worth. To be treated with respect, just once, in a place where he had every right to be seen as an ordinary customer. Yet what truly swelled the room with emotion was neither the coffee nor the eggs. It was when Marcus exhaled softly and looked across the dining area. A beam of light caught his medal, reflecting against his back like a tiny star come to life. His voice rang out, gentle yet unwavering. "It's not today that I've earned this. I once dined under the desert sky in Iraq, giving my life for my brothers. I do not seek glory. I only ask to be treated as a human being." Those words carried no grandiosity, no flourish like a shard of broken glass, suddenly revealing the earth beneath. They struck everyone present. Hardened hearts softened, eyes brimmed with tears. Some leaned forward to brush a fingertip over the metal on the table. Others bowed their heads, as though to touch a pride they never knew existed in their city. And a few, caught unawares, reached quickly for napkins to dab at their eyes. The diner's usual clamor resumed, hushed conversations, the clink of spoons against mugs. But unlike before, every sound now resonated with newfound respect. Mia glanced at Joe with a conspiratorial smile together. In their own way, they had witnessed a miracle unfold. A small community learning to listen, to apologize, to comfort. Moments later, an elderly gentleman approached, bearing a loaf of bread. He set it gently on Marcus's table, eyes shining. "Thank you for your service," he murmured. In the bustle of life, people still find ways to express gratitude, even when words go unspoken. Marcus smiled back, tilting his head in farewell, a warmth in his grin like the first light of dawn. A few minutes on, the diner returned to its normal rhythm. A cluster of high schoolers chattering in a corner, an old man sprinkling chili flakes over his meal. Mia carrying a platter of cinnamon rolls to new customers. Yet Marcus's table remained unchanged. The seal medal, the coffee cup, the plate of eggs, and an empty seat reserved for anyone in need of a quiet place to be seen. The narrator looked up with a gentle smile. One might wonder, can a single story, a solitary medal, and a few whispered words truly change the way we see one another? That question, planted like a seed in the audience's heart, invites each of us to linger a little longer and to witness the full wonder of everyday humanity. Imagine that with a single press of a button, the whole world learns your story. That is the technological miracle bestowed upon Marcus Walker. The once forgotten flip phone in his hand suddenly became a media weapon when Mia, her hands trembling with excitement, posted to TikTok the body cam footage of Officer Connors capturing the moment Marcus called Deputy Director Alvarez. 2 hours later, views soared past 500,000, and the hashtag number #RespectSealWalker swept across Twitter and Facebook like a storm. The online community awoke in unison. In Navy SEAL, veteran groups where members shared tales of desert hardship and spilled blood, the comment, "He is one of us," flooded timelines. A former commanding officer reposted the photograph of Marcus among his special operations team in the desert, calling him a silent hero, a man who would willingly stand in the line of fire to save his brothers. Homeless advocacy organizations chimed in, emphasizing that with just one phone call, Marcus proved who truly deserves our respect. MSNBC's website updated continuously. A summary of the incident aired during prime time. The Seattle Times ran an in-depth analysis headlined, "When a Veteran SEAL Became Invisible and the Miracle of One Call." Every word seemed bathed in pride and indignation. The refrain, "How could we let this happen?" repeated without end. Even the politicians in Olympia could no longer stay silent. The mayor of Tacoma issued a public apology, pledging to launch an internal investigation and vowing to put human dignity above all prejudiced pressures. Across the street, the Tacoma Police Department headquarters became a focal point for peaceful protests. Demonstrators held signs reading, "I am Marcus Walker," and "Justice for Veterans." They did not shout or chant, they simply stood, rain-soaked, with unwavering resolve. Back at Harborview Diner, the familiar space had transformed. Marcus's booth became a refuge for many, each quietly sipping hot black coffee. Mia wept when she learned that Joe had just received a gift card from the Silent Strength charity, intended to thank Mr. Walker for his service. Joe smiled softly, slipping the card across the counter for Marcus to see. Marcus merely smiled back, his eyes moist with gratitude, a warmth powerful enough to thaw the cold of countless unnoticed days. Soon, a group of young people arrived with bicycles and portable speakers. They sat on the sidewalk, played gentle music about war and peace, and live-streamed Marcus's story. Some pedaled in tears, realizing how often they had walked past lives needing help. An Uber driver even stopped by, tossed a $5 bill on Marcus's table, and said, "Thank you for protecting us, whether in full gear or just wearing a medal." A wave of kindness spread outward. University of Washington students organized a fundraiser, handing out paper and pens for passers-by to write notes of thanks. By day's end, they had collected over $2,000 to support Marcus and other homeless veterans. In the comments beneath the Seattle Times article, one person remarked bluntly, "We must see people through the lens of our hearts, not their ID cards." A middle-aged woman shared, "I passed Mr. Walker every week and never knew the story behind his eyes." She vowed to stop rushing past silent lives around her. After those stormy days, Harborview Diner returned to its normal rhythm yet fundamentally changed. Mia placed a handwritten note at Marcus's booth. "Please, sit here, this seat is reserved for you." Joe hung a small plaque by the window, emblazoned with, "Where Heroes Sit." Though Marcus never sought the title of hero, at least now he was no longer invisible in his city. The narrator gazed through the rain-spattered glass, thinking, just one call, one video clip, and two eager hands sharing it can unlock countless frozen hearts. As the door's bell chimed with the arrival of another curious customer, eyes inevitably fell upon the medal glinting on Marcus's table. Imagine that a single slice of bread can become a gift. What then might compassion achieve? That was the lesson Marcus Walker taught Harborview Diner 1 week after his miraculous morning. Before dawn fully broke over Tacoma, he stepped beneath the familiar awning carrying a steaming plate of scrambled eggs. But this time, the meal was not for him. Marcus set the plate on the table marked "Waiting Guest," reserved for a homeless man who often stood silently outside, passed over as if invisible. The worn pilot's jacket Marcus wore its chest pocket holding his seal medal now unfurled into a communal symbol, newly suspended on a gleaming chain at the corner of the counter, directly beneath the faded welcome sign. Passers-by could not help but look up. The medal, once Marcus's personal token, had been transformed into a small flower blooming on the street, reminding everyone that each person deserves a place to belong. Mia emerged from behind the counter, carrying a small framed photo. It captured the moment Marcus dialed Deputy Director Alvarez. The instant justice and mercy converged. Below the image, she had added the inscription, "Dare to serve, embrace service, and honor human dignity." She placed the frame beside the "Where Heroes Sit" plaque. Thinking that perhaps grand speeches were unnecessary, such simple actions alone could awaken people's consciences. Today's customers came to the diner for more than breakfast. They paused to photograph the medal and the framed photo, then discreetly slipped donations into a jar for Joseph's Haven, the local homeless support organization. An elderly couple entered and laid a thick envelope on Marcus's table. "Thank you for reminding us to honor the quiet lives among us," they whispered, leaving behind the warmth of their generosity along with their half-finished coffee. A computer science student arrived early, set his laptop on Marcus's table and typed rapidly, "Our team will fund extra beds at Joseph's Haven." Thanks to number respect Seal Walker, I realized I had to act. He did not wait for Marcus to nod. Marcus's simple acknowledgement was all the encouragement needed. In that moment, Marcus understood that genuine action, not words, stirred the heart. Beyond the window, the patter of rain seemed less gloomy. Tacoma drizzled, but inside the diner the atmosphere was curiously warm. Some visitors, on their first trip, confided that they had come to boast to friends about dining at the social media heroes' hangout. They approached the booth, stared at the metal, then chuckled sheepishly, recognizing a truth they had long overlooked. Dare to Serve was no longer just local folklore. International YouTube channels began covering Marcus's story. A Dutch travel vlogger hailed him as a silent icon with a grand heart, while a Mexican food blogger described Harborview Diner as a cafe with extraordinary character. Comments poured in from around the globe, weaving together disparate hearts into one tapestry. Amid these shifts, Marcus's stride remained unhurried as he headed for the door, broad shoulders moving with quiet purpose. He knew fame was not his aim. A simple, "Thank you," a welcoming corner seat, and small acts of kindness were enough to plant seeds of hope. He was no ostentatious hero, but he had sown the spirit of daring to serve and honoring human dignity. A few minutes later, as Marcus prepared to leave, Mia pressed a small chocolate into his hand, "To warm your heart on rainy days." He accepted it with a nod, gratitude shining in his eyes. Outside, the rain continued to fall, but it did not dampen his resolve. Within the folds of his pilot's jacket, the metal swung gently, as if bowing to the crowd that learned to think of others before themselves. The narrator paused, softly reminding, "Someone once said the world changes through the smallest of deeds." And here, at Harborview Diner, a former SEAL learned to give more than he received, teaching the community to judge people by their actions rather than their appearances. The SEAL medal, once a personal keepsake, had become a symbol of courage and humanity, mending the invisible wounds within society. A Tacoma transit bus eased to a stop outside, its sign blinking. The homeless man from the booth climbed aboard, hope renewed in his heart. Under the diner's awning, Mia and Joe watched him go with smiles. No words could capture their pride, only hearts beating in unison with the gentle patter of raindrops. And you, my dear audience, brace yourselves for the next twist in this jaw-dropping story. So, before you get too cozy, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you're truly loving what I'm doing here. And drop a comment below letting me know where you're watching from and what time it is for you. It's always a thrill to see who's joining us from all corners of the globe.